This is Darnell Williams. I am your host for the Community Focused program. Once again, coming to you, bringing you what I consider personalities and luminaries across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, here in Boston, and also the nation. And it's a great time to really check in with you, to bring you information about what's happening. This morning is no exception. Typically, I talk about items that are really relevant or current recent events, but I'm going to save that for the actual show rather than me doing a 3 to 4, maybe 5 minute diatribe in terms of what's going on my streaming thoughts, because I think I have a radio guest who can amplify each one of the points that we delve into by in herself. Let me introduce our guest. First off, good morning, Tayla.
Good rising.
That's right. So I have in the studio someone that is a radio personality on WBCA 102.9 FM. She talks about politics. She talks about news. I got to understand what she means about opening up the third eyes. I know about the 2-1. Now, actually, we got 3 eyes, 4, because you got eyes of the heart, too. But she has these unorthodox conversations
Leading to universal consciousness.
and so that is what. And so we're gonna break that puppy down, so we know exactly what all that means. But I'm sure that it means that she's pushing the edge to make sure that people stay woke, and that you're dealing with these issues that are impacting us. Because sometimes folks, not only just you and I, Tayla, folks want to get cute, they want to get intellectual, and they want to be impotent.
He said impotent. That was the country coming out. I heard it. Impotent.
That was a city slicker way of saying it. But you research, you develop stories that shed light on unconventional truths that are often overlooked, ignored, and suppressed by mainstream media, bringing immeasurable satisfaction. So we're going to how do you measure that? Tayla, you're a determined, hardworking individual. I've known you for a good 10, 12 years now, I believe, and I've never seen you not working. But you try to bring the best way to learn the craft is through applied experience. That means you've been beat up and scarred a little bit along the way.
Hey, you want to see my back?
You've been beat up,
Shot
up, bushwhacked, lied to, right? Thus, she has held various positions to reinforce this school of thought. The most recent as a social media director for the Chica Project, a project based for non-for-profit focusing on closing the opportunity gap with an unapologetic focus on the Latino community.
Black and brown.
Okay, well, that's a good thing. That means people of color.
Yes.
Okay, that's universal. Here she is responsible for growth and visibility of a program by coordinating and implementing social media campaigns. But in addition to that, you have a radio show called Wake Up with Tayla. Are you on every morning?
Yes.
Okay.
If you listen every morning.
Okay. And you also have a real estate gig as well. So
it's not a gig, baby.
What is it? Is it called?
It definitely is. I want to say it stemmed from a need. So first I want to say good rising and good afternoon, good evening, or good night. Waking up with Tayla Andre isn't about waking up the time of day that we link up, but about waking up your third eye with unorthodox conversations leading to universal consciousness.
Okay, now so for the lay leader that's just tuning in, she's gonna break all of that down for us, because either you're having a cup of coffee, or you're just getting in, or you're on your way to church, or you're on your way to somewhere.
So the good rising comes from a conversation that I had with Sabir Bey in etymology and the meaning of words. And when you say rising versus morning, the root of those words are completely different. When you're mourning something, the sun is rising. What are you sad for? So I no longer
it's a brand new day.
It's a brand new day. The day is rising. And so good rising, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My West Indians love to pick up the phone and say good night. So where are your manners? Regardless of what time of day it is, how are you? Waking up with Tayla Andre has absolutely nothing to do with the time of day that you listen to the program, because we record it, we want to listen again. So regardless of the time, waking up your third eye. So you have two eyes, and science has proven that your penile or pineal or that pine cone shaped part of your brain is where your intuition comes from, is where the God consciousness, where your conversations with God take place. And so it's your third eye. Waking up your third eye with unorthodox conversations, having those aha moments over and over again. Unorthodox conversations are the conversations that we're not having on mainstream media. Now, for instance...
Why do you say that we're not having them?
Because we're not. We are not having... You know what? Radio and television are too afraid to not be politically correct. They don't want the backlash of...
Wait a minute, you're afraid to be politically correct?
No, they're afraid not to be politically correct. So we always have to we have to dot our I's and cross our T's and make sure everybody feels warm and fuzzy. But at the end of the day, what most media, I'm gonna say most, not all, what most media portrays are the warm and fuzzy feelings that are directed toward the masses that typically don't look like me. And so we're going to talk about things that are going to make you uncomfortable. We're going to talk about things that push the envelope. We're going to can you say that? That is the way that I conduct myself. We are going to push the envelope at all times so we can have a real conversation. And it's like talking to your kids about drugs or about sex. You don't tiptoe around it. You get right to the point. And if we had more conversations in media that got right to the point, we'd be able to have those unorthodox They wouldn't be unorthodox. They'd be, mainstream media.
Well, let me ask you the question. I was watching the other day a conversation that they had. Jerry Springer, of all people, who's now considered Judge Jerry.
That's interesting.
He's a judge.
Yes, that is.
So this guy was a former mayor, I think it was Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
And then he brought a show on that had folks. I said, where did he find these people? That they would be fighting each other, they'd be throwing chairs at each other, and now I consider that unorthodox.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, because they were just off the chain, not what they call reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think you mean it to that extreme. Or
no, I don't think.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Jerry Springer.
Because please don't hit me with something up in here.
No, that's completely different.
Okay.
Unorthodox conversations, having a conversation about the 9/11 conspiracy theory, having a conversation about drugs and what it means to have all of these dispensaries when homegrown is the best. And it just conversations that you're not typically going to hear is what I focus on in order for universal consciousness, so we can all have a better understanding. Because if I'm talking about things that you're not
tuned into,
so you're like, oh, those moments,
mm-hmm,
and then we can, once we agree to either agree or disagree, because you don't have to agree with what I'm saying, but we can at least discuss it and debate it. And then when you have those unorthodox conversations, when you have those uncomfortable conversations, when you are engaging with people that you don't typically agree with, you guys can see each other's point of view.
You're expanding your horizon,
come
basically.
to, universal consciousness. I understand you. I might not like what you're saying. I may not agree with what you're saying, but I understand who you are as a person a little bit better because I now understand your thoughts and how...
The foundational beginnings of how you arrived at that.
Yes.
Because a person, I've always adopted a phrase that you must walk a mile in my moccasins before you begin to understand my pain. And when you don't make that journey in my shoes...
Is that cultural appropriation?
No, yeah, it is. I'm acknowledging my Native American brothers and sisters to let them know that just because my black pain is my black pain does not erase or eradicate or reduce theirs. Is that there's a shared consciousness around pain, and that whether you're Jewish, Native American, Latina, LGBTQ community, all of us have universal pain that we're dealing with. And so if we can come and appreciate that we're not there by ourselves, and we're not number one, you're number two, number three. No. We're all in this together, and how we approach it is by listening and learning.
Exactly. I just want to make a point, because we just had Indigenous Peoples Day, that a lot of us that consider ourselves African American are actually Indigenous Americans.
Okay, break that down for the listening audience. Not for me, but...
So when you take a look at the numbers, Jay-Z said men lie, women lie, numbers don't, right? And when you take a look at the numbers of the enslaved Africans that came to America versus the number of enslaved people that were in America, the numbers don't match.
Well,
we didn't
break that whole slow down. See, you started out doing the etymology breakdown. Now you're doing the numerology breakdown. Back in the day, we used to call that the numbers, but.
Okay. I see where we at today.
So no, but really, when you say African Americans,
yes.
The only reason I'm pushing back is because when we were not slaves when we were brought here, we were captured and enslaved.
Enslaved, yeah.
And so as a result of the numbers, so we go back to Jamestown, 1619, 400 years ago. Is it 400? Yeah.
Yeah, we just had 1619.
1619. 400 years ago, those indentured servants were in fact captured and then enslaved.
Yeah.
And so then after that, that trickle became a flood. So now how do you go from that juncture to say now that we were indigenous?
So what did Columbus discover? Nothing.
He discovered my Porsche that I was sitting in.
He discovered nothing. There were people that were here that
and that's
were
not
living.
enough, but that's, reality. America was already occupied.
Exactly. Okay. You're right. And who were they occupied with? When you look at
indigenous people.
When you look at the indigenous and when you look at the Native American community,
yes.
Prior to being whitewashed, they were all copper-skinned individuals. So if I tell you that you're a Native American and we just gave rights in land to Native American, what do you want? You want your rights and you want your land. But if I tell you you are an African American and you don't have no rights and you don't have no land.
Well, I think most people don't realize is how we got to this notion of African American, aka or black. Because when the issues
used to be colored. Because we talked about this. It's on your birth certificate, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I remember our interviews back in the day.
Okay, so then we should remind our listening audience, this is not your first time on the Community Focus.
No, it's not.
But that was, but it's still relevant to say that when the discussion came up, they would say, well, I'm from Ireland, or I'm from Italy, I'm from England, I'm from France, I'm Canadian. Everybody was able to point to a land or their experiences because of where they came from.
Correct.
But we were brought from a swath of land in Africa about 3,000 miles, and we all came through the Goree Island, or the gate of no return. They brought us to the Caribbean, to Puerto Rico, to the Dominican Republic,
Hispaniola.
to Hispaniola. They took us to Brazil. They drop you off in Puerto Rico, Trinidad, Jamaica, Haiti, which is Hispaniola anyway, all of the islands, and then they brought you to Jamestown and other places because that was the cotton, that was the what do you call it? The silk and the trade, the trades between Portugal, England, and other countries that were in the Dutch. They were using that as the trade route.
Well, I know you know this, but for the listeners, we had a port right here in Boston as
well. Yeah.
And Faneuil Hall is actually where the slaves...
Peter Faneuil, that's where they were.
That's where they were. And that's why people are up in arms about changing the name of Faneuil Hall, because that's where the slaves were brought so you could have a picnic.
Things were built. There are a lot of schools that are now, I believe I just saw most recently where the North Church in Boston has discovered that part of their history was built on the slave trade. And now they're going to make that a part of their efforts to use that to educate people that Paul revered, whose house is right over near that. And yet, but they were saying that we want to make sure that people really know. And we have not had that same kind of a balanced conversation about Faneuil Hall and Peter Faneuil and what the monies that were used. Many of these, what they call institutions within our midst, within our range, have been built. I think Brown University is another.
Yeah. Well, but pause. It's not just Brown. It's
I know. It's
the
all
United States of America.
I know, but when I'm talking about these, what do you call it? We call it Ivy elite colleges.
Correct.
And Brown is not by themselves.
And it's Harvard.
And yeah, I see. My job is to get the guests to say it.
Just so you don't want to be you're not liable. That's what you. And I'm not liable. I didn't say it. It was the guest.
No, it wasn't. I didn't say that. That was
Well,
my
if we're
avatar.
gonna
Asked the
If
question.
we're absolutely, if we're gonna
No,
talk
I have no
about
problems being liable.
talk about the HBCUs that are named after white people.
Oh, yeah.
So if you really want to talk about it, and that goes back to the unorthodox conversations that nobody want to really have. Nobody wants to talk about how the HBCUs aren't getting any money. The HBCUs are one of the only institutions that you can actually negate payment and have it fall off your credit. You can't go nowhere else into an Ivy League and have your student loans fall off. But if you go to a HBCU, you can go ahead and
You gotta
claim.
remember how the HBCUs were founded. After the Reconstruction period, they established the Freedmen's Bureau because it was against the law, still on the books, for blacks and whites to be educated.
Yes, sir.
So they created, because you couldn't read or be taught to write. So they created these universities to deal with the 4 million blacks, and they created these higher institutions of learning, because that was the first thing those 4 million slaves wanted. If you don't do anything, they can take your land, they can take you, they can take your children, they can take your wife, but they cannot take your education. So those HBCUs were built based upon, but then they reneged on the deal, because when they pulled the troops out of the South, that's when the reign of terror came.
I love him.
That's what started. So that's, to me, that's unorthodox, because we don't talk about that.
We don't
stuff.
talk about it.
But how do we get here?
Let's wrap around. Let's bring it back.
Bring it back. So we were talking about, you were talking about where we are in terms of opening up that third eye. And talking about the intuition. I think you call it God's way of talking to you and giving you a sense of balance and purpose.
I know I watch too much Gaia TV.
You watch what? MacGyver?
No, it's Gaia TV.
Oh, Gaia. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Now I'm channeling you right now.
I watch too much Gaia. So, it's. I'm not an extremely religious person, and I know my Southern Baptists are gonna get me, my Pentecostals is gonna get me, but I am a religious person, and if you sit and listen, be still and know I am God.
Yes, I have no problems with that.
You definitely hear him or her, or they.
Now you just brought that into the 21st
I
century.
sure did. You want to know why? Because the Bible says man was made in their image. Who is them? Who is there? He didn't say was made in my God image. It said made in their image. No matter what.
And most theologians, he was talking about God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
But hold on, but the Holy Spirit in the Son didn't exist at that time, though.
Oh, that's not true, because in the beginning was the Word.
In the beginning was the Word.
That's right.
And so Jesus was born in the Word?
No, Jesus was not born. Jesus was there in the beginning.
With the Word.
Jesus was the Word.
Okay.
And the Word became manifest among us and dwelt among us, and we touched his flesh, and we saw the miracles. So the Word was never the beginning, end, and all that. But don't go there.
Hold on,
Don't go there with me.
You better teach me.
Yeah, we're going. It's called the Book of John, 1 John, not John.
You've been around young people.
I've been around.
You've been around them young people.
I gotta tell, as they say, I can break it down too now.
So
When it comes.
That was
scripture,
the first.
The Book of John. I would tell you to go to the Book of John.
Okay.
I will walk you through the Book of John,
We
verse by verse, word by word, and I will expound on it for you to understand. I will be your foundational understanding when I say,
I'm
here's
loving
not
it.
my words, but these are the words in the scripture. And if you believe what is there in the scripture, if you break it down, not make this into a study class of about expounding, but listen to what is there.
Mm-hmm.
And then understanding the root causes, just like you did when you said the difference between good morning versus good rising.
I got you.
It's no different. It opens up your spiritual understanding where you will be revealed into the dark mysteries of what's in the Bible.
So we're gonna have a part 2.
Okay.
And you're gonna learn me.
I will school you, my man. Listen, I have no problems with that. Freely has it been given to you, freely shall you give it. And thereby you will be imparted with knowledge and understanding, wisdom. But you will know the precepts and the judgment that come forth out of the book of life. That's what I'll do for you.
Thank you. I accept.
Okay, good.
I accept.
We'll figure it out later in terms of how we make that happen. Who are you?
Who is Tayla Andre? So I, like everybody else, are a multitude of experiences, and came to this conclusion of self. And I think I'm changing every day. So transparency. I just recently had a baby.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's
so
great.
I have a 14-month-old, and everybody thinks he's 3 because he's really big.
He's an old soul.
He's an old soul. He looks like an old man. His facial expressions, like there's grown men. They're like, hey, little man, how you doing? He was mean mugging me. I just felt like I needed to show him respect. So like, he's been here before, and he conducts himself like an old man. But
14 months.
14 months. But another thing that we don't speak on is mental health, and postpartum hit me bad, like really, really bad. And so I was like completely off the scene. I don't think anybody saw me for almost a year.
So you weren't on the radio as well?
No, I was doing nothing. They were replaying old shows.
Well, we got quite a few shows too that we utilize.
Yeah, we put them in rotation because it just. I couldn't get out of bed, let alone out of my house.
That's a very, 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 very powerful statement that you just made, because sometimes when we go through transition and change, sometimes you say, I'm okay. And then you realize down the road, you ain't okay. It's like, no, man.
I told everybody, I'm all right. I'm good.
But we because we're so energetic and we're very people persons. But in the reality is that we're dealing with some uncertainties.
No, it wasn't uncertainty.
Okay, it wasn't. What was it?
I don't know what it was.
Postpartum.
It was postpartum, and it hit me really bad, and it hit me for a while, and I was in denial about what I was experiencing. And it took me, like, I'm still not 100%. Like, I'm probably like a good 65-70% right now.
Of coming back to where you were before?
Yes.
But sometimes that's not a bad thing. You know why?
Go ahead. Tell me why.
No, tell me what because I see that smile on your face. So that means you just had an aha moment.
No, it is. So I had to be broken down to the lowest bit. It's like, so taking it to real estate real quick.
Okay.
I needed to gut out the house. I brought it down to the foundation. I gutted it. I just completely demolished the old me, destroyed my old beliefs, my old habits, and I had to rebuild. And if anybody has ever owned a property, sometimes you can't just fix the roof. Sometimes it's not just putting down new flooring. Sometimes you need to knock it down and start over. And that's what I needed to do. And God, Buddha, Krishna, Allah, whoever it is that you believe in, went ahead and took me down to my lowest and said, come on now, let's rebuild. And so I'm still in the rebuilding phases. We don't have any of the technology or the electronics, or we don't have any of the utilities in yet, but the house is framed up, the foundation is poured, the roof is on.
I think that's good, and you're just in time to get ready for winter. But there's a scriptural phrase that always stays close to me when we go through this phase, and it says, "And except that a kernel of wheat fall to the ground and die, it cannot bring forth much fruit." You know what that means?
No.
In other words, sometimes you got to go and die, lose yourself. If you find yourself, you're going to die. But if you die and you become nothing, then you can come back, because now you're going to be more of a useful channel. You'll be more useful tree that you can bring more fruit, not only to yourself but to others. But you got to die first, not physically die, but you got mentally, spiritually, you got to become nothing so that you can become something. That's what that means. Because then now you can be of a benefit. You can be a vessel. You can be a channel. You can be something of use other than for yourself.
Amen.
So that's what I hear you saying. So you're going back to the basics. But everything that you said so far, there is a spiritual counterpart to that that will give you the foundational insight as to what you're going through.
I love this. Having a conversation while adding on the spiritual side, because we all have that duality within us.
Oh, absolutely.
And I don't think a lot of us tap into it enough.
People are afraid of it.
Yeah.
Because you have to do what's right.
Yeah.
You got to operate in the light.
Yeah.
And you can't be about self. You got to be about others.
Others.
And then
Service.
that's a definitely third eye conversation.
You see how it all ties
Yeah,
together.
it's a third eye conversation. It says, how can I bless you when you're sitting around hating? You're blocking your own blessings because you hate something and you got differences with people. So I'm not going to bless you. God bless me because I'm a good person. But I hate that person over there that looks like you. That ain't going to work.
It never does.
So anyway, let's go in. So let's shift for a minute, because I think you've given us a good foundational piece of who you are. You have any brothers and sisters?
I do. I am the eldest of 5 on my mother's side, and then I am the eldest of 2 on my father's side.
So it's 7 of y'all?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
5, 6.
6?
There's 6 of us.
Oh, the eldest of 2. Oh,
yeah,
so I can't count you twice.
You know, you can. You can if you want to.
Okay, it says 6. Okay, I got you.
So I do. I have siblings, and then my family adopted my best friend because she was adopted, and Marcella has been considered my sister for years. So I technically I do have 7.
Okay. It eventually comes out.
Yeah. You knew it. You knew there were 7 of us.
It comes out. So how would you describe what you would say are your bedrock values that describe you?
Family first and foremost.
But what does that mean? Family. I understand family connections, family relations, but what's the value underneath the family?
Love, respect.
Okay.
Building foundations. I am now learning about. So I'm Cape Verdean. My mother's Cape Verdean. My father's Southern Baptist, Black.
So most Cape Verdeans don't identify with their African side, or do they?
I want to say that's. I want to say that some of them do not identify, and I think because a couple have been so vocal that it is now a belief that all Cape Verdeans don't identify with being African. So,
and most people don't know that Cape Verde is islands right off of the coast of Africa. I think y'all got quite a few islands out there in Cabo, right?
Yes, so we have 10 islands.
Right.
One is just volcanic rock, and so there's 9 that people actually live and thrive on.
Do you get a chance to go back?
I have never been back.
Oh my gosh!
I have never been back.
We'll talk about that in a minute. Listen, I want everybody that's listening to Tayla Andre, who's on the show today, but I want you to make sure that be sure to tune in next week when we will continue this conversation right here on 93.7 WEEI. If you're coming to this conversation on the Community Focus program, I am here in the studio with my guest, radio personality, person who extraordinaire, who's opening up my third eye and yours this morning. Morning Rising, I believe.
Good Rising.
Good Rising. And so, unorthodox conversations
leading to universal consciousness.
So Tayla Andre is in it, but we're talking about the 10 islands that make up Cape Verdean. You identify as a African from Cape Verde. 9 islands are occupied, but some of the Cape Verdeans don't necessarily want to be known as they're on their African descent side. Why is that?
The same reason why we have colorism across the globe. The same reason why nobody wants to admit that Abraham Lincoln had some color in him. Because
they would never mention that in the books, right?
Unorthodox conversations. It's because we are under the notion that white is right, and anything outside of being white, that one drop of black, nobody ever mentioned Barack being half white. They always wanted to focus on him being a Negro and, being a Muslim, and it was never about his white mother. And so I think a lot of Cape Verdeans, especially, in my family as well, all the Cape
range
Verdean,
of colors in the family?
We have a range of colors, but
and that's like that in Puerto Rico too, so it's like the same thing.
It is.
And so in Cuba,
it's a global colorism.
In Cuba, in the Dominican Republic, I mean, you go any place, there's a range of complexions that make up who we are. And some of us are in denial, though.
I can't. Listen, in my dying process,
yes,
one of the things that I left was trying to save people. Now, if you are trying to save yourself, I'm diving in to help. But if you I give up, and you just... So if they don't want to help themselves, I'm not going to help them.
That's a hard thing to come to, but I understand it.
Oh, Darnell,
you can take them to the water, but
you
can't make them drink. Take them to the water, but you can't make them drink. You
can't even make them realize there's water in front of them. Never mind making them drink. They won't even acknowledge the water that they see.
But they also complain that you're the one who pointed out the water and how it was not good for us.
Listen, my name Bennett, and I ain't in it. You know what's crazy? Okay, my grandmother's maiden name is Bennett, so I love, yes.
Okay. Hey, my Nana.
Mm-hmm.
So, but really, that you're talking about unorthodox. If you can't make them drink or encourage them to drink, you can't open up their third eye. You're saying that it's time to move on.
Absolutely.
That's a tough position.
Yes.
Let's talk about politics.
Yes. Whoop, whoop. Shout out to all of the winners.
Okay. Shout out to all the winners where? In what cities, what states?
And you know what?
Virginia's winning. First?
We could really quickly. Virginia's winning. They have the Democratic governor now.
No, Democrat was in Kentucky, but you already had a Democratic governor.
In Virginia, he was running against the. Oh, you're right. But he was running against the Trump supporter.
Right.
Okay.
And so I think Virginia won both the legislature on the House and the Senate side. They flipped that. That's what the difference is. I think that's what you're trying to highlight.
Yes, I am. I'm trying to highlight that we're winning. We're winning. That light will always beat darkness.
Do you think that these elections, this right now, the country is in not only a constitutional crisis, we're in a racial divide, where hatred and white supremacy and homophobia and anti-Semitism is alive and well and thriving.
Show me where it died.
Well, I think that it may not have been died.
We have dormant. Cameras. No, it wasn't dormant. We have cameras. We have technology. We have social media. So now everything that was happening before, we're just seeing it. We can see it now. So it's like the child that was at home getting beat up every day and was like, oh, I fell. I was on the playground. I was falling down the stairs. And then you meet the father and the father start talking to the mother crazy. You're like, oh, I see. I can see now.
Yeah. So, it opens up your eyes in terms of domestic violence and sexual assault and trafficking. We got so many issues. But if we talk about the politics, and when you say that we're winning, I am of the frame of thought that yes, we know that there needs to be a fundamental shift of decency and articulation and civility that has been eroded. Our position and stature across the world and our position in terms of how we deal with each other inside the continental United States needs to be altered drastically. That's what I'm talking about. So when you say that we're winning, I want to put winning into context. Winning what?
We are winning. We are winning against, so all these things that are currently being visualized and being shown on a massive scale are fighting because they are dying off. So racism.
Wait a minute. What's dying off?
Racism is dying off. That's why they're fighting so hard to keep it alive.
Okay, white people have been in charge. White people have told us since we were kids that we are superior, you are inferior.
So I recently just brought Jane Elliott to Boston, and she talks about the birth girth and how over the last 30 years, Caucasians have been diminishing as far as live births are concerned.
Clearly.
And that's why we are fighting so hard when it comes to abortion. Like, no, abortions are illegal. You want to know why they're wrong? Because white people are becoming minorities, and black people and Latinos and Asians are having so many children that it's making by, what did they say? By 2030, yeah.
2035.
They're going to be the minority for real. So, you know.
That's got to be frightening if you've been on top of the food chain and the system has been designed.
Get over it.
I call it, here's my language.
You know what? They're scared. They're scared because they don't want to be treated the same way that we have been treated. So
well, I think they're fearful that if black folks or people of color get in charge, well, they do to them what we've done to them. And I think that's what the fear is. And that's a legitimate concern or fear.
And it's not.
But that's not the way we operate as people.
It's not. Our soul doesn't.
We're always connected to the earth. If I got a cow that's got milk, you're going to get some.
Exactly. Exactly. That's who we are as a people.
You know, just don't take all the fish out the water. Let's give a chance to replenish so we can all eat.
Yeah.
But my point is that is disconcerting for a lot of people that they will no longer be the dominant culture. And the point that I was going to make is that I use this phrase throughout my career. I never had the complexion for the connection.
How you going to where you going? I'm trying to get that connection.
I don't have a connection. I just got faith in God. That God will work it out for me. But the thing is, Tayla, if you're tuning into Community Focus Program, we're talking, conversing, having an unorthodox conversation with Tayla Andre. And yet we are at a point where we're talking about politics and change. And what does that really mean? And I would just use a recent event that talked about changing the name of Dudley Square to Nubian Notion.
Nubian Square. So
Nubian Notion is a store.
Yeah.
That from the family that ran it for 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
And that's where we got introduced to Nubian, but not that some of us knew what Nubian really means. But let's go there. Roxbury is no longer a totally black community anymore. And so the vote, but no, who cares? Because it comes down to the vote.
That's Malcolm X's stomping grounds.
No.
I know the numbers said.
What is let me give the listening audience the numbers on that question. Recently, there was an election, and recently it says the people who wanted to change the name from Dudley to Nubian Square was 207 votes.
Okay.
And the people who said no was 28,763 votes.
And let me tell you why.
I'm so glad you asked that question.
So the same reason last week when we were talking about Faneuil Hall, and Faneuil Hall being where the slave block were for them to have picnics, is this, like, no one knows who Faneuil was. No one knows who Warren was.
Peter Faneuil.
No one knows who Dudley was.
Thomas Dudley.
Nobody knows who Bowdoin was.
Yes. In other words, the streets that are named after the English lords and stuff all over Boston
were slave owners, and like they weren't as ruthless as the southern slave owners, but they were still slave owners. That if I can't think of the book right now, but it's a yellow book, and you can find it at the RCC library. It's about 125 pages, and it goes through Boston's history, New England's history.
No, I have that book. Yeah, I know that.
You know
that
book is $139 online.
Oh, get out.
That book, for the 100 pages that book is over $100.
Well, sometimes, if you want something to be a secret to certain groups, you put it in a book because they ain't gonna read it.
I ain't the one. I'm well read. And still learning every day. And so the reason why I believe those numbers reflect what they do is because people don't have knowledge of self and don't understand who they are glorifying when, we talk about all of these streets, repping corners and repping neighborhoods, but you don't even know who the street's original name came from and who that man was and what he did to your ancestors.
One of the things that I always admired about Byron Rushing, because he was over at the African American Museum before he became a state rep, was his history of Roxbury and the history. And I think that's Vandermeer, what's his name, over at UMass Boston. They have been sharing the knowledge of these things. You mentioned one word in your conversation that people are talking about. Well, I'm going to a picnic, and I try to eradicate. I say you can go to a cookout, you can go to a gathering,
but I would suggest that picnic.
I suggest you drop the word picnic from your vocabulary, because that was going to go picnic, and therefore that was when they were talking about lynching somebody. And so you would take a word that is really towards your genocide and talk about that's what we're going to do.
Knowledge of self. When you don't know any better, you can't do better.
Right.
What's the spiritual scripture for that?
He who lacks knowledge is a fool.
We should take this show on the
road. And you are to shun him.
Exactly.
No. I know, for the lack of knowledge, my people perish.
Yeah. Yeah.
But knowledge is so critical that because we're laughing, but we're laughing because the flip side of humor is wisdom.
Yeah.
And that's what people need to understand. So we talk about politics, but we also need to understand, when you think about the local elections, we look at what's happening at the state level, we're looking at what happened at the national level. What is your sense as to where we are as a nation?
So, as a nation, going back to what I was saying earlier, as far as, we are winning, when you take a look, like, racism is real. It didn't go anywhere.
You said it's dying, though.
But it is dying. And for the most part, you have more young people that are engaging in unorthodox conversations with people who don't
What kind
look
of young
like
people?
them.
White young people, black
Right.
young people, Latinos,
Asians?
Asians?
All of us, because we're interacting on social media. We are no longer in the bubbles that we used to be. So the white kids that are growing up in Wellesley, that are surrounded by people who only look like them, they don't have to go outside of their comfort zone to interact with other people. Like, it's not...
So you're saying the walls and the barriers that were established in the 19th and 20th century no longer apply?
Are being demolished.
Well, that's a good thing.
And while these young people are making their way outside, walking fast,
Okay.
they're seeing faces that they never saw in their community. They're having conversations that they weren't privy to in their bubble. And they're saying, like, my dad says the N-word all the time and talks about these porch monkeys, but I don't see it. I don't get it. So do we have a small population of parents that are teaching their children to perpetuate the ignorance? Yes. But I think for the most part, a lot of these young people are seeing that their parents are trickling down from their grandparents, and it's not it doesn't feel right to them.
All right. So in other words, they have some internal conflicts about what's being shared and nurtured in terms of their environment.
Yeah.
Well, I had a phone call recently, and the person used the N-word.
Oh, y'all bleep that out.
Huh?
Y'all bleep that out.
Well, they actually said they wanted me to say, you need to stop niggering up this show. and that was a straight up. So I called the person. I had my folks trace the number down, and I called him. He said, "You need to stop niggering up your show." And he said, "Because white people are part of your community." So I called the number, had it traced down. I called the person's phone. They happened to be a New Hampshire resident.
Hey, boo.
So I said, I got a voice message from the person living from this phone number. I'd like to have a conversation with them. The person hung up on me.
That would have been a great on-air conversation.
I called back. They did not pick up the phone again. But the message that I'm delivering is that I was willing enough to reach out, regardless of what he said, to reach back out to understand where are you coming from.
Call us back.
Call us back. Let's talk about this.
Let's talk about this on air without using bad words.
Well, but the fact is that I had enough courage to call the person to confront the kind of ignorance that I thought that was coming from him. Because there's been white people, white females, there's been LGBTQ members on this show, domestic. So I don't look at it through. But the community that I live in, that I know, are the ones who are disadvantaged because of economic system, because of the gentrification issues and the disparity of income.
Pause.
Pause.
I have to pause you there.
Okay.
So
whoa.
I need to get this off my chest, because a lot of us have problems when it comes to gentrification. But when you sell, as a real estate agent, when you decide to sell your house to the white man for an additional $25,000, $15,000, $5,000, when you could have sold it to a family of color that looks like you, that is from the neighborhood.
And you're telling me you want me
in,
to take a less of a paycheck?
I'm telling you. You know what? Yes, I am. So if you have two options. You can either sit here and complain, or you could do something.
I'm gonna take the check and move.
And so, but look at what that 25.
I mean, that's the way people do.
You're right. That additional 50, and it's $25,000 is a little like overboard. Most of the time, it's anywhere between $5,000 and $15,000.
But if people have been shortchanged all of their life, how are you going to tell them not to sell it for more?
So I'm not telling
that's
you.
That's our society.
So that $15,000 that you're gonna blow on a new car, that you're gonna blow on furniture, that you're gonna blow on new clothes, when you just set up your community that you claim that you love so much to lose. So that money can be replaced. But having a family that looks like you, raise a family that looks like you in that house.
That's a tall glass of tea that you're asking me to drink.
You know what? Then don't say a damn thing about gentrification, because you the one that sold that house when you had options. Okay. You had options to sell it to a young family that looked like you, that had children that looked like you, and could have raised their children in that house. But instead, our community is being disbanded. We are being sent out to the Brocktons, to the New Bedfords, to the Fall Rivers. And it's okay. You want to know why? Because in the next 10 to 12 years, New Bedford and Brockton and Fall River and Lawrence are going to be jumping. And it's going to be affordable, and it's going to be beautiful, and the school systems are going to be dope, and they're going to want to come right back to the suburbs that they started from and leave the city. It's a cycle, and it's been going on for years, and so it's nothing new. You just have to understand where we are and conduct yourself accordingly. Do not complain about the things that you are not willing to change.
Well, I think that's an interesting aspect to look at it. But I want to look at it when people are working 2 to 3 jobs. Mm-hmm. The house may have been handed down to them by their mothers and fathers or significant others.
Mm-hmm. We're not talking about $150,000 right now.
No, most of these houses are going between $400,000 to $700,000.
I mean, like the difference.
Oh, the difference.
I had a client that wanted to sell her house.
Okay.
To
just say you want to sell it for how much?
She wanted to sell it. I'm not going to give real numbers. She wanted to sell it for $100 to somebody who didn't look like her, instead of selling it for $95 to somebody who looked like her.
And you're saying they should have took the $95 in order to maintain the racial identity of Roxbury?
Not just Roxbury.
Just all over.
Yeah.
I hear you, and I know that's the space that you're in, but I'm looking at it from the side of
the seller. You're looking at
that. The seller says, I shall to get the maximum that I can get.
I want all my money.
Because you can sell today and you can't buy tomorrow.
Why is Roxbury so gentrified? All I'm saying is, I'm just saying, either you're gonna complain about it or you're gonna do something about it. Period. Like I no judgment to whatever you decide, but I am judging you if you decide to do one thing and then complain about the decision you made. I do know, and I would like to take a moment to speak to the elders, because I know a lot of elders that are on fixed incomes that have, taxes that are completely overwhelmed. Your children won't do right, can't get right, and don't want to take on the house and the responsibility, and the house looks quote unquote ugly, and so you're selling your home for pennies because you don't believe that you could get, or you're being told that you can't get XYZ number for it. And so a lot of our elders are being bamboozled and having their homes swindled.
Oh, absolutely. What they should be doing is talking to some of these church leaders and put some of these young people in these houses with these elderly folks that can help offset those expenses by renting out rooms to them, long as they are credible and they've been vetted.
So the thing is, a lot of homes that these elders, so in my experience, I'm finding that elders are living in like one room,
right,
and
the rest of the house is shut down.
It's not just shut down, it needs to be gutted, like we talked about earlier.
Okay.
And so there is work that needs to be done, but there are resources that they can tap into, and when you don't know, lack of knowledge, you perish, your family perishes, and you end up selling,
and you lose a valuable asset that could be what do we call that? Transfer of generational wealth. Because most of the wealth that is built, when we talk about net worth for a family, comes through real estate.
It does.
It's
that's for everybody.
Simple.
That's for any.
But we're 82% of residents in Roxbury rent.
Yeah.
And so that is the thing. So we got 19% who own and 82% rent. And then we have this conversation that we need to have more affordable apartments or places in our neighborhood. We have a disproportionate share. It doesn't mean that I don't think there needs to be more, but we have a disproportionate share of renters.
So what we also have is we have people that don't understand AMI. AMI is area median income, and
that's right.
Add Boston's area median income also includes Newton, and so while
the numbers get jacked up because
all
of
the
that.
way. So right now our area median income is $91,000.
So you don't think that the most folks who reside in Roxbury makes $91,000?
We know that not to be true, because
I think they make around 30. They make around 30 grand.
50% of Bostonians make less than $30,000 a year.
That's right.
And so there's definitely resources, and there's conversations that need to be had, and our elders need to be empowered. And one of the things that if your children don't want to do right, and if you feel like you have no other options, my suggestion is for you to go ahead and have a company come in and do the work on your house. Sell the house as an investor instead of giving your house to an investor that's going to get 3 times as much as they paid you for. And then put the money that you sold the house into a trust. Into a trust because as an elder, if you ever go into assisted living or into a nursing home, they take everything. So you put it into a trust so it's not you, so the nursing home can't touch it. But you also put it in the trust with stipulations so that your grandchildren and your children can't just squabble the family inheritance. And
in other words, you're saying that they can't put their paws together to say, when is grandma leaving?
Nah. And you
no,
put
but
the restrictions.
I'm being very serious.
You are.
Yeah.
And this is real life.
Yeah.
You put the restrictions that whoever gets married, only the person in the bloodline gets the money, not the husband in case they
become the executor of the trust.
Put restrictions on the trust and make those restrictions known. Like the college student can get $10,000 when entering into college, or
I would make it a little different. The $10,000 will pay for your books over a 4-year period.
But restrictions, whatever your restrictions are,
you get these kids $10,000 a day, man. That's a hell of a weekend.
And create
with
the
Barney,
generational. You're right. You're right. He's right.
Weekend
it would have been
Barney.
blown. Thank you, Grandma. You're right.
I know. I can see her raising up the crystal. Yo.
Exactly. And be done and have no money the next week.
Talking about, what am I gonna do?
So put those restrictions on, and maintain the family wealth, because right now we have people that are
People
selling
need to
their
hear this.
homes and then going into an apartment. Like,
Yeah, but you're going back to that. To me, does not make any sense.
It doesn't.
It doesn't
Darnell.
make any
It
sense.
doesn't.
It's like we put ourselves. I mean, there's a rule of thumb that I use, Miss Andre. I say, I'm in a hole. So what's the first rule of life when you find yourself in a hole? Stop digging. Because people just continue to dig themselves further and further into the hole because of their habits. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Hi.
Stop digging.
Pass them right behind you.
So the thing is that we have come, not necessarily full circle, but what we've done is that we've painted a very, very, I wouldn't call it stark, but insightful picture today. And so would you look at this from a social media? You're saying that's the primary vehicle, because during our generation, if I didn't find my friend, we went out and found him. I couldn't call him on the cell phone because we didn't have him. So we went and found. We looked for the bike that was put together by parts from 6 other bikes, or the scooter that we made out of the clothesline, or we had stocking caps on when ripping up Mama's stockings and put on some Murray's grease and put on our head so we can have a finger wave. So
he dated himself now. That's not that ain't even my generation.
I read that.
I thoroughly enjoy. I miss spending time with you.
Oh, thank you. Same here, my friend.
You are super insightful. You're knowledgeable, and your soul is as bright as the sunshine.
Well, you know that everybody that. First of all, thank you. I accept that, but it's like just like you. I'm learning every day, every step, and as I look at these folks who are addicted in our community, and I think about when I drive down, what do they call it? Mass cast? What do they call it? Mass cast or Mel cast? Whatever. Everybody's got a different term for it. That's a tough situation to be standing on the street corner begging for money, but then I see them and I observe, because they'll take the money and then they go over into the group, get their fix, and then they're in a stupor for the next 2 hours, and you can see them animation.
Listen, it's about 2 hours for us to have that conversation, so we won't even dig ourselves in a hole. How about that? Let's stop digging.
So we can do a flyby. Was that a flyby?
we just fly by that.
All right. So what else would be pertinent to you as we get ready to close out for this morning? What would be you want the listening audience to know from you, from your lens, in terms of where we are as a people, in terms of being consciously unorthodox, streaming towards our consciousness? What would you say to them?
I would say good rising, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. I am Tayla Andre. Waking up with Tayla Andre has absolutely nothing to do with the time of day that we link up, but about waking up your third eye with unorthodox conversations leading to universal consciousness. And I just want you to pay more attention to your surroundings, be mindful of what's going on, and don't always look at the news and take it for face value. Dig a little deeper, do your due diligence, and be still and know that I am God, because you have all the answers within yourself, and we are always seeking outside validation and answers. And when you sit and be still and just listen, he, she, they,
that's right.
Will give you all the answers that you need. I thank you. I love you. I appreciate you, and I hope you guys have an amazing day.
And this is Darnell Williams, your host. I will be called either as he, him, or his in order to. So let you know, I understand that, but my message is real simple for you. I want you to go out and make sure that you be not overcome with evil, but you go overcome evil with good. Trust God, seek His guidance and His faith and His wisdom, to understand that when you read Psalms and Proverbs, and then you reach that third eye, as Tayla said, the intuition, it will give you insights at what you should be doing, the path that you should take. And there'll be a voice in your ear to say, go this way, and you will find favor in it. I am so grateful to have you come on, my friend.
Thank you. Can I spell my name?
Yes, you can.
Tayla Andre.
This has been the Community Focused Program. with Tayla Andre. Go out and have a blessed day and a wonderful week.
Mwah.